December 22nd, 1944. Snow falls across a narrow crossroads somewhere in the Belgian Ardennes. The forest is silent except for the distant thump of artillery that never truly stops. An American Sherman tank rolls to a halt, its engine ticking as it cools. The crew climbs out cautiously, boots crunching through ice-crusted mud. Their breath hangs in the frozen air. 50 yards ahead, half hidden by shattered pines, sits a German Panther. Its long 75mm gun points uselessly at the sky. No smoke rises from the engine deck. No bodies lie nearby. The Wehrmacht crew simply walked away, abandoning 60 tons of the finest armor Germany ever built. The American commander approaches slowly, his Thompson submachine gun ready. He circles the machine, studying the thick-sloped armor that could shrug off anything his Sherman carried. Inside, the controls are labeled in German, the ammunition racks still half full. He makes a decision that would have seemed insane 6 months earlier. His radio man calls battalion. The message is simple: we're taking it. Within hours, white stars would be painted over black crosses, and American tankers would climb into the same machines that had been killing them for years. By the winter of 1944, the American armored divisions rolling through France and Belgium had learned a brutal lesson. The Sherman tank, backbone of the United States Armored Force, was outmatched. Not by a small margin, not in specific situations. It was outmatched fundamentally, lethally, in nearly every encounter with German heavy armor. The numbers told a story written in burned-out hulls and dead crews. American tankers knew that meeting a Panther or Tiger meant needing 5 Shermans to guarantee a kill. 4 would probably die in the attempt. The Sherman was a masterpiece of American industrial philosophy, easy to build, easy to ship, easy to repair. Factories in Detroit and Chicago stamped them out by the thousands. They crossed the Atlantic in vast convoys, rolled off ships in England and France, and flooded into Europe like a mechanical tide. Reliability was superb. Crews could maintain them with basic tools. But when that 75mm gun fired at a Panther's frontal armor from 300 yards, the shell bounced off like a stone hitting a castle wall. Meanwhile, the German 75mm high-velocity gun could punch through a Sherman's armor from over a mile away. Crews called their Shermans Ronsons after the cigarette lighter. One strike and they ignite. The joke masked real terror. Gasoline engines meant fire spread quickly. Ammunition stored in the hull meant catastrophic explosions. Tankers developed superstitions, rituals, desperate little beliefs that might keep them alive one more day. Some refused to wear helmets inside, believing they needed to bail out fast. Others welded extra track links and sandbags onto their hulls, adding weight that slowed them down but might stop one more shell. The Wehrmacht knew it too. German tank commanders in France reported engaging American columns with clinical efficiency. A single Panther positioned in bocage country could destroy a dozen Shermans before withdrawing. The thick hedgerows of Normandy became killing fields. American armor would push through a gap, and German gunners would methodically work down the line, turret traversing with mechanical precision. By September, entire American armored battalions had been chewed apart and rebuilt with replacement crews who arrived at the front knowing their odds were terrible. But September also brought something unexpected. As American forces raced across France, the German army began to crack. Not everywhere, not completely, but in places the facade of invincibility shattered, units retreated in disorder, supply lines stretched impossibly thin, fuel became scarce. A Panther tank consumed enormous amounts of gasoline, and the Wehrmacht logistics system was collapsing under Allied air attacks. Tanks that broke down were abandoned. Tanks that ran dry sat silent beside roads. Crews that had no ammunition spiked their guns and walked east. American intelligence officers began cataloging an unexpected resource: intact German vehicles left behind in the chaotic retreat. At first, these were towed to rear areas for study. Ordnance teams crawled over them, measuring armor thickness, testing gun mechanisms, analyzing every engineering choice. Reports flowed back to Washington describing technical superiority that American factories couldn't match. The Panther's sloped armor was a generation ahead. The optics were clearer. The gun was devastatingly effective. But the vehicles weren't just being studied. In quiet conversations at forward command posts, officers began asking dangerous questions. Could these tanks be operated? Could they be fueled with captured German supplies, or jerry-rigged to American fuel? Could crews be trained quickly enough to matter? The official answer from higher command was cautious. Enemy equipment was unreliable, the argument went. Ammunition resupply would be impossible. Maintenance would be a nightmare. Besides, it violated the clean organizational logic the Army preferred. American units used American equipment. The supply chain was built around that assumption. Yet on the ground, reality cared nothing for organizational charts. Tankers who had watched friends burn to death in Shermans looked at abandoned Panthers and saw a chance to fight on equal terms. Company commanders facing German counterattacks with inadequate armor saw captured Tigers as battlefield equalizers. The gap between doctrine and desperation was closing, and winter was coming fast. The German offensive that exploded through the Ardennes forest on December 16th changed everything. Hitler had gambled the last reserves of his army on one desperate thrust toward Antwerp, hoping to split the Allied armies and force a negotiated peace. The initial assault achieved complete surprise. Entire American divisions were overrun or encircled. Fog and snow grounded Allied aircraft. German panzers punched deep into American lines, creating chaos across a front that had seemed stable just days before. But the offensive revealed something critical about the Wehrmacht's condition. Many German tanks rolled into battle nearly empty. Fuel was so scarce that German planning documents included detailed maps of American supply dumps to be captured. The entire operation depended on seizing enemy gasoline. Tank commanders were ordered to advance until their tanks ran dry, then abandon them and continue on foot. It was madness born of desperation, and it meant the battlefield became littered with German armor in various states of abandonment. American units cut off by the German advance faced annihilation. Small task forces formed from whatever troops could be scraped together. Infantry, engineers, clerks, cooks, anyone who could hold a rifle. And increasingly, anyone who could operate a tank, regardless of whose flag had been painted on it. The normal rules stopped applying. Survival became the only doctrine that mattered. At places like Bastogne, surrounded American forces scavenged everything. German rifles, German ammunition, German rations from captured supply trucks, and German tanks. When a Panther was found abandoned but intact, crews figured out the controls through trial and error, through captured manuals, through sheer mechanical intuition. The Germans labeled everything precisely. Kraftstoff meant fuel, munition meant ammunition. The gear shift pattern was different but comprehensible. The gun sight was actually superior to American designs. Word spread quickly through the informal networks that connected frontline units. Radio chatter mentioned American tankers rolling German iron. After-action reports filed by desperate company commanders included matter-of-fact mentions of captured vehicles pressed into service. At first, higher headquarters responded with confusion, then with cautious acceptance. Situations changed faster than regulations could keep pace. The technical challenges were significant but not insurmountable. German tanks used different caliber ammunition, which meant crews depended entirely on what they found in the tank or scavenged from destroyed German vehicles. The Panther's Maybach engine required specific grades of oil and particular maintenance procedures. American mechanics learned on the job, adapting, improvising, making do. Radio equipment operated on different frequencies, which actually became an advantage. American crews in German tanks could monitor Wehrmacht radio nets, understanding battlefield communications in real time. Identification became the most dangerous problem. From a distance, a Panther looked like a Panther. American anti-tank teams, already jumpy and trigger-happy after days of German attacks, couldn't always distinguish friend from foe. Friendly fire incidents happened. Crews learned to drape American flags over engine decks, to paint huge white stars on every surface, to fire flares at the first sign of American troops ahead. Some units developed recognition signals, specific ways of moving or positioning the turret that indicated friendly forces. The psychological dimension cut both ways. American tankers felt a fierce satisfaction climbing into machines that represented everything that had been killing them. There was revenge in it, a sense of turning German engineering against its creators. Crews gave their captured tanks nicknames. Some kept the German names they found stenciled inside, others painted new ones. One unit reportedly named their captured Panther Vengeance and drove it straight back toward German lines. For the Germans, seeing their own tanks firing at them created profound confusion and demoralization. Wehrmacht tactical doctrine relied heavily on recognizing vehicle silhouettes. Tank commanders were trained to instantly identify threats by outline and sound. When a Panther appeared, German troops assumed it was friendly until it started shooting. By then, it was often too late. The psychological impact of being killed by your own equipment, of not knowing which tanks to trust, eroded combat effectiveness in ways that went beyond simple casualties. The practice spread beyond the Ardennes. As American forces pushed into Germany itself in early 1945, captured armor became more common. Entire German tank battalions surrendered with their vehicles intact, fuel tanks empty, nowhere left to retreat. American armored divisions that had lost Shermans to breakdowns or combat damage sometimes replaced them temporarily with captured Panthers or Mark IVs. The makeshift nature of it offended military sensibilities, but it worked, and working mattered more than elegance. From inside the turret, everything felt wrong at first. American tankers trained on Shermans knew every control by touch, could load and fire in darkness, could operate wounded and half-conscious. The German tanks demanded relearning everything. The gunner's seat positioned differently. The controls responded with unfamiliar resistance. Even the smell was different, a mix of German grease and the particular metallic scent of foreign steel. Crews climbed inside captured Panthers with technical manuals scavenged from dead German tankers, documents splattered with mud and sometimes blood, and taught themselves through necessity. The learning curve was steep but fast. Combat is a brutal teacher. One loader figured out the ammunition stowage system by sheer logic, recognizing that German engineering favored efficiency. The shells were organized by type, clearly marked, positioned for quick access. Within an hour of taking control, he could maintain nearly the same rate of fire as an experienced Wehrmacht crew. The gunner discovered the Zeiss optics provided clarity American equipment couldn't match. He could identify targets at ranges that would have been guesswork in a Sherman. The commander found the cupola design gave better visibility, more protection, a fighting position that felt genuinely superior. Fear mixed with exhilaration. These men had spent months being outgunned, knowing every engagement tilted against them. Now they sat behind armor that could stop American guns, behind a weapon that could kill at distances they'd only experienced from the receiving end. One sergeant later described it as feeling like a knight who'd stolen a dragon. The power was intoxicating but also terrifying because they were still learning, still improvising, still one mechanical failure away from being stranded in enemy territory inside a very obvious target. The technical reality was undeniable. German armor represented a different philosophy of tank design. Where American industry prioritized quantity and reliability, German engineers pursued qualitative superiority even at the cost of complexity. The Panther's sloped frontal armor was 80 millimeters thick at 55 degrees, creating effective protection equivalent to over 140 millimeters of vertical plate. An American 75 millimeter gun couldn't penetrate it from the front at any practical combat range. The German 75 millimeter KWK-42 gun could penetrate 138 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. In direct comparison, the Panther could kill a Sherman from distances where the Sherman couldn't even scratch the Panther. The armor sloping reflected sophisticated understanding of ballistics. Angled plates caused shells to ricochet or shatter rather than penetrate. The V-shaped hull design deflected mines. The interleaved road wheel suspension system, while maintenance-intensive, provided stability and speed across rough terrain. German tankers had fought from positions of technical confidence, knowing their equipment gave them an edge beyond training or tactics. But technical superiority came with crippling drawbacks. The Panther was a maintenance nightmare. Its Maybach engine was powerful but temperamental, prone to overheating, requiring frequent servicing with specialized tools and specific parts. The interleaved wheels packed with mud and froze solid in winter, immobilizing the tank until crews chipped away ice with hammers and blowtorches. Fuel consumption was catastrophic. A Panther traveling cross-country consumed 1.3 liters per kilometer. In comparison, a Sherman managed nearly twice the range on the same fuel. For German forces with collapsing logistics, this meant even undamaged. Tanks were abandoned when supply trucks couldn't reach them. American crews inheriting these machines faced immediate logistical challenges. Ammunition was the first problem. The Panther carried 79 rounds of 75 millimeter ammunition in various types. Armor-piercing for tanks, high explosive for infantry and fortifications, smoke rounds for screening. Once those rounds were gone, the tank became useless unless more could be scavenged. Crews became expert scavengers, stopping at every destroyed German tank to raid ammunition racks, sorting through wreckage for shells that weren't damaged. Some units established informal supply networks, trading captured German equipment between companies, pooling resources to keep a few tanks operational rather than spreading ammunition too thin. Fuel presented similar problems. German tanks ran on gasoline, the same as Shermans, but required higher octane. American fuel worked but reduced performance and increased engine knock. Crews learned to mix captured German fuel with American supplies, experimenting with ratios, balancing availability against performance. Maintenance became a constant improvisation. American mechanics studied German technical manuals, learned German mechanical terminology, figured out how to adapt American tools to German specifications. When German parts weren't available, they fabricated replacements, modified components, made things work through ingenuity born of necessity. The radios operated on different frequencies using different modulation, which American units turned into an intelligence advantage. Crews monitoring German communications could hear Wehrmacht units calling for support, reporting positions, coordinating attacks. This real-time intelligence sometimes provided minutes of warning before German assaults, just enough time to reposition or call in artillery. Some units used captured German radios to broadcast false orders, creating confusion in enemy ranks. The line between using captured equipment and engaging in deception operations blurred in the chaos of the winter fighting. Yet despite all these challenges, American crews made it work. They adapted faster than German logistics could respond, operated with flexibility that rigid Wehrmacht doctrine couldn't match, and turned German technical advantages into American tactical victories through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. The psychological warfare dimension proved as valuable as the ballistic advantage. German infantry trained to recognize friendly armor by silhouette, sound, and movement patterns. When a Panther approached, the natural assumption was safety, not threat. Wehrmacht soldiers would wave, even approach for support, only realizing their fatal mistake when the turret swung toward them and the white star became visible. Those few seconds of confusion were often enough for American crews to fire first, achieving surprise that would have been impossible in a Sherman. German radio intercepts captured the mounting confusion. Wehrmacht tank commanders reported engaging enemy armor, then contradicted themselves moments later, uncertain whether they were shooting at captured vehicles or actual German units. The fog of war thickened when your own equipment became untrustworthy. Some German commanders issued orders to engage all Panthers on site, unless they could confirm identity through radio challenge codes. But this hesitation cost precious seconds in combat situations where speed meant survival. American intelligence officers recognized the morale impact. Interrogations of German prisoners revealed deep unease about the practice. One Panzer officer captured in January 1945 stated that seeing American crews operating German tanks better than the Wehrmacht shook his confidence in German superiority. The psychological narrative that had sustained German troops through years of war was cracking. If American tankers could master German equipment within hours and fight effectively, what did that say about the supposed technical and tactical supremacy Germany had claimed? The practice also affected American morale in unexpected ways. Crews who had felt outmatched and vulnerable suddenly possessed the tools to fight on equal terms. The Sherman had been a mechanical disadvantage they endured, a weakness compensated for by numbers and air support. The Panther gave them individual parity, even superiority. After-action reports noted increased aggressiveness in units operating captured armor. Tankers took risks they would never have attempted in Shermans, pushed deeper into German positions, engaged targets at longer ranges. Some of this was justified by the equipment's capabilities. Some was overconfidence that occasionally proved costly. Leadership decisions regarding captured armor revealed the gap between doctrine and battlefield reality. By the book, American Armored Doctrine discouraged using enemy equipment for all the logical reasons. Supply complications, maintenance difficulties, identification hazards, organizational confusion. Senior commanders at Corps and Army level generally opposed the practice, seeing it as a sign of desperation or poor discipline. But those commanders were miles behind the front lines, studying maps in heated command posts, making decisions based on reports filtered through layers of staff officers. Battalion and company commanders saw reality differently. They watched their Shermans burn, counted casualties, calculated odds, and made pragmatic choices. A company commander facing a German counterattack with 6 operational Shermans didn't reject 2 captured Panthers because they violated supply doctrine. He integrated them into his defensive line, positioned them where their superior armor and firepower mattered most, and used every advantage available. These field-grade officers often operated in a space of what their higher headquarters didn't explicitly need to know. After-action reports mentioned captured vehicles in passing, buried in technical details that busy staff officers might not scrutinize. Some commanders actively encouraged the practice. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hogan, commanding a task force cut off during the Battle of the Bulge, explicitly ordered his men to use whatever equipment they could capture. Surrounded near Marquardt, short on ammunition and fuel, Hogan's force included several captured Panthers and at least 1 German half-track. He integrated them into his defensive perimeter, using the Panthers to anchor positions where their armor could withstand German attacks his Shermans couldn't survive. When relief forces finally broke through, they found Hogan's command still combat effective largely because of captured equipment. The German perspective on all this ranged from practical acceptance to bitter irony. Experienced Wehrmacht officers understood that American forces were adapting, learning, applying the same pragmatism that had made them formidable opponents. Some German tank commanders expressed professional respect for American crews who could master unfamiliar equipment under combat conditions. The technical learning curve was significant, and doing it under fire demonstrated competence. But younger German soldiers, particularly those indoctrinated with Nazi propaganda about racial superiority and German military excellence, found it deeply demoralizing. The narrative they'd been fed suggested that German engineering and German warriors were inherently superior, that ultimate victory was inevitable despite temporary setbacks. Watching American troops operate Panthers as effectively as Wehrmacht crews undermined that entire worldview. Some prisoners interrogated in late war expressed not just military defeat but ideological collapse, questioning everything they'd been taught about German supremacy. The moral and ethical questions rarely troubled American crews in the moment. This wasn't about abstract principles. This was about survival and winning. If using German tanks saved American lives and killed German soldiers, the decision was obvious. Historians and military theorists could debate the finer points later. On frozen Belgian roads under artillery fire, morality simplified to stark clarity. Your friends were dying in Shermans. German tanks worked better. Use them. But beneath the immediate pragmatism ran a deeper truth about American military culture. The United States Armed Forces were fundamentally pragmatic institutions, shaped by industrial democracies that valued results over rigid tradition, where Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized hierarchical obedience and procedural correctness. American military culture rewarded initiative and improvisation. Captured German tanks became another tool, another resource to be exploited. The flexibility that allowed such adaptation was itself a strategic advantage, one that German forces bound by stricter doctrinal thinking struggled to match. December 21, 1944. Task Force Hogan occupies defensive positions around Marcoret and Hotten in the Belgian Ardennes, directly in the path of German armored spearheads driving toward the Meuse River. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Hogan commands 400 men, a mix of armored infantry, tank destroyers, and the remnants of his tank battalion. The situation is desperate. German forces have penetrated deep into American lines, creating pockets of surrounded units fighting isolated battles across the forest. Hogan's task force has been cut off for 3 days. Supply trucks can't reach them. Casualties are mounting. Ammunition is running low. The German 2nd Panzer Division pushes west, confident that scattered American resistance can be crushed or bypassed. Our intelligence suggests Hogan's force is weak, demoralized, likely to surrender or retreat when pressed. The assessment is wrong. Hogan's men are dug in, determined, and about to receive unexpected reinforcements in the form of 3 abandoned Panthers discovered in a forest clearing 2 kilometers east of their perimeter. A reconnaissance patrol finds the tanks at dawn, sitting silent among the trees. German crews fled during the night, probably running low on fuel, possibly spooked by reports of American forces closing in. The Panthers are intact, fully armed, their ammunition racks holding 60 rounds combined. The patrol leader radios Hogan immediately. The colonel's response is instant. Bring them in. Get them running. We're using them. By mid-morning, 3 American tank crews are learning German controls under pressure. Mechanics who've never seen a Maybach engine figure out the starting procedure through trial, error, and desperate intuition. The first Panther coughs, shudders, then roars to life, black smoke belching from the exhaust. The crew cheers. The second starts within minutes. The third has a fuel line problem that an inventive sergeant fixes with a piece of rubber hose scavenged from a destroyed truck. By noon, all 3 Panthers are operational, camouflaged among American positions, their long guns covering the eastern approaches. Hogan positions them carefully. He places 1 Panther on the northern edge of his perimeter, covering the road from Samry, another watching the eastern valley approach, the third held in reserve near his command post. The crews paint hasty white stars on the turrets, drape American flags over the engine decks, and settle in to wait. They don't wait long. German reconnaissance elements probe the American positions in early afternoon. Motorcycle troops, light armored cars, infantry advancing cautiously through the trees. The Americans hold fire, letting them approach, watching through the superior German optics that give crystal-clear views at ranges American equipment would struggle with. Hogan waits for the main force he knows is coming. At 1400 hours, German armor appears. Four Panzer IV advanced down the road from Samri, infantry following in half-tracks, confident they're overwhelming a trapped and weakening American force. The German tank commanders scan for threats, looking for Shermans for anti-tank guns. They see the American defensive positions. They also see a Panther in the tree line turret facing the road, and they assume it's friendly. A German tank rolls within 200 meters, well inside killing range, before the American turret fires. The first shot hits the lead Panzer IV in the frontal armor, penetrating clean through, detonating ammunition inside. The German tank explodes, turret flipping skyward, blocking the road. The second German tank swings its gun frantically, searching for the threat, still not understanding that the Panther is hostile. The American crew fires again. Another hit, another kill. The remaining German armor tries to reverse, colliding with their own half-tracks in panic. American anti-tank guns open fire from concealed positions. Within 90 seconds, the German probe is shattered, burning vehicles clogging the road, survivors fleeing back toward their own lines. The German confusion is absolute. Radio intercepts captured later show Wehrmacht commanders arguing about whether American forces had somehow brought up German reinforcements, whether some Panther unit had mistakenly engaged friendly forces, whether they were facing captured equipment. The uncertainty paralyzes their response. While German officers try to determine what happened, Hogan's force consolidates its positions, redistributes ammunition, prepares for the next assault. That assault comes at dusk. A full German battalion attacks from two directions simultaneously, trying to crush the American pocket before darkness falls completely. Artillery pounds American positions. German infantry advances under covering fire from mortars and machine guns. Panzer IVs and at least two Panthers from a German unit engage from long range, firing into the American perimeter. Hogan's captured Panthers return fire. The battle becomes surreal. Panther engages Panther across frozen Belgian fields, crews speaking different languages but operating identical machines. The American crews discover their captured equipment performs exactly as feared. One Panther takes a direct hit from a German 75mm gun, and the shell ricochets off the sloped armor, doing no damage. The American commander grins fiercely, traverses, fires back. His shot penetrates. The battle around Marcoret continues through the night. German forces attack repeatedly, trying to dislodge Hogan's task force before American relief columns can break through. Each assault is met with coordinated fire from American and captured German weapons. The three Panthers become centerpieces of the defense, their armor shrugging off hits that would destroy Shermans, their guns killing German tanks at ranges that surprise even their American crews. One engagement becomes legendary among the survivors, a German assault. Blitgun, a Sturmgeschütz III, approaches from the south just after midnight, its low profile nearly invisible in the darkness and falling snow. American infantry spotted at 50 meters, too close for comfort, already within the defensive perimeter. The reserve Panther, positioned near Hogan's command post, rotates its turret and fires point blank. The high-explosive round detonates against the assault gun's casemate, killing the crew instantly, the explosion lighting up the entire battlefield for 3 seconds of brutal clarity. German commanders commit more forces as the night wears on, determined to eliminate this stubborn American position. But every attack reveals the same problem. The Americans are fighting with German equipment integrated into their defense, creating identification confusion that costs the Wehrmacht precious seconds in every engagement. German tankers approach positions expecting to coordinate with friendly Panthers, only realizing their error when white stars become visible and American guns fire first. The psychological impact radiates beyond the immediate battlefield. German units attacking other American positions in the Ardennes begin reporting suspected captured equipment, seeing Panthers where none exist, hesitating when they should press attacks. The rumor spreads faster than the reality. Wehrmacht commanders issue conflicting orders, some demanding immediate engagement of all armor, others requiring positive identification before firing. The confusion degrades German tactical effectiveness across the entire offensive. Task Force Hogan holds through December 22nd and into the 23rd. American casualties mount but remain sustainable. German losses are severe. Destroyed panzers litter the approaches to Marcoret. Infantry casualties from machine gun and artillery fire are heavy. More critically, the German timetable is shattered. 2nd Panzer Division's advance stalls against this unexpected resistance. Hours become days. The drive toward the Meuse loses momentum. Relief comes on Christmas Eve. American armored columns from 3rd Army punch through German lines, linking up with Hogan's surrounded force. When the relief troops arrive, they find the task force still combat effective, still holding and still operating 3 captured Panthers integrated fully into their defensive positions. One lieutenant from the relief column later wrote that, seeing American crews casually maintaining German tanks, discussing their mechanical quirks with the familiarity of experienced operators, was one of the strangest sights of the war. But Marqueret was not unique. Similar stories unfolded across the Ardennes during that desperate winter. At Bastogne, the surrounded 101st Airborne Division used captured German small arms, ammunition, and at least one half-track. Near St. Vith, American tank destroyer crews operated a captured Hetzer tank destroyer after their own vehicles were destroyed. At Stoumont, American infantry used German Panzerfausts against German tanks, the irony lost in the immediacy of survival. The practice reached its peak during the Allied advance into Germany itself. As Wehrmacht resistance collapsed in March and April of 1945, entire German armored units surrendered with their equipment intact. American mechanized divisions rolling toward the Elbe River sometimes included captured Panthers and Mark IVs simply because they were available and functional. One armored company in 3rd Army operated 5 Panthers for nearly 3 weeks, eventually abandoning them only when ammunition supplies were exhausted and no more could be found. The tactical effectiveness was undeniable. After-action reports filed by American units operating captured armor consistently noted superior performance in direct engagements with German forces. The equipment advantages that had favored the Wehrmacht now worked in reverse. American crews benefited from better armor protection, more powerful guns, superior optics. Combined with American tactical flexibility and better command coordination, the result was devastating effectiveness. German prisoners interrogated during this period expressed profound demoralization. One Panzer officer captured near Remagen in March 1945 told his interrogators that watching American Shermans was frightening but expected. Watching Americans operate Panthers better than German crews was crushing. The technical superiority Germany had relied on as proof of inevitable victory was gone, turned against them by an enemy that adapted faster than German industry could respond. Numbers remain difficult to verify. The chaos of late war combat, the informal nature of many captured vehicle operations, the reluctance of some units to report practices that might be officially discouraged, all combined to create incomplete records. Post-war Army historians estimated that American forces operated at least several dozen captured German tanks in combat roles during the winter of 1944 and spring of 1945. The actual number was probably higher, possibly significantly higher, buried in unit records that listed tanks by quantity without specifying whether they were Shermans or Panthers. What couldn't be quantified was the psychological impact, the corrosion of German confidence, the proof that American forces could master German equipment and use it more effectively than the creators intended. The immediate military reports filed in January and February of 1945 documented the practice with clinical precision. Battalion S2 intelligence officers noted captured German vehicles in their unit equipment rosters, sometimes listing them as addendums to standard inventory, sometimes incorporating them directly into strength reports. The paperwork was complicated. Official tables of organization had no provisions for Panthers in American armored battalions. Supply requisitions couldn't process requests for German 75mm ammunition through normal channels. Maintenance logs struggled to categorize repairs on foreign equipment. Higher headquarters responded with pragmatic acceptance. By late December, when the Ardennes offensive was still in full fury, 1st Army issued informal guidance acknowledging that forward units were using captured equipment and would not be disciplined for it. The memo stopped short of official authorization but made clear that battalion commanders had discretion in utilizing available battlefield resources. 3rd Army under Patton went further, actively encouraging the practice when it provided tactical advantage. Patton himself reportedly inspected a captured Panther operated by an American crew and declared it acceptable if it killed Germans. The Army Ordnance Department saw opportunity beyond immediate battlefield expediency. Technical intelligence teams followed combat units specifically to examine captured vehicles for engineering insights. Detailed reports analyzed German armor metallurgy, gun design, optic systems, suspension engineering. American tankers operating Panthers became valuable sources of comparative data. They could describe handling characteristics under combat conditions, identify weaknesses German crews had learned to work around, and provide practical assessments that laboratory testing couldn't replicate. One ordnance report from February 1945 compared Sherman and Panther performance based on interviews with crews who had operated both. The findings were brutally honest. The Panther was superior in firepower, armor protection, and optics. It was inferior in mechanical reliability, fuel efficiency, and ease of maintenance. For American industrial strategy, this confirmed existing choices. The United States couldn't match German qualitative superiority tank for tank, but didn't need to. Superior numbers, better logistics, and tactical flexibility compensated for individual equipment disadvantages. But the report also noted something unexpected. American crews adapted to German equipment faster than anticipated. The learning curve for operating a Panther was measured in hours, not days. Maintenance proficiency took longer, but American mechanics demonstrated impressive capability to improvise and adapt. The conclusion suggested that equipment differences mattered less than crew quality and tactical doctrine. A well-trained crew in inferior equipment often defeated a mediocre crew in superior equipment. The question was whether American training and doctrine could produce enough well-trained crews to overcome individual tank disadvantages. As American forces pushed into Germany during March and April, captured armor became almost commonplace in some units. Mechanized reconnaissance units particularly favored German half-tracks and armored cars for their speed and reliability. Tank battalions integrated captured Panthers when available, positioning them in defensive roles where their armor mattered most. Some units developed standard procedures for evaluating captured equipment, checking mechanical condition, determining ammunition availability, deciding whether to integrate or destroy. The practice spread beyond armor. Infantry units used German machine guns, particularly the MG-42, which American troops considered superior to their own weapons in sustained fire roles. Artillery batteries occasionally employed captured German guns when ammunition was available. Supply units drove captured German trucks when American vehicles were unavailable. The phenomenon reflected practical adaptation at scale, an army learning to exploit enemy resources systematically. Photos from this period show the visible results. American tank columns rolling through German towns include Panthers marked with white stars. Infantry squads carry a mix of American rifles and German weapons. Supply depots stockpile German ammunition alongside American ordnance. The visual confusion reflected deeper transformation. The American military was absorbing enemy equipment into its operational culture, treating captured material as battlefield resources rather than curious trophies. German civilian reactions varied. Some saw American troops using German equipment as vindication, proof that German engineering was genuinely superior even if the war was lost. Others interpreted it as humiliation, their own weapons turned against them by conquerors. Most civilians by this point simply wanted the war to end, caring little about whose tanks rolled through their streets as long as the destruction stopped. Wehrmacht soldiers still fighting saw it differently. Every captured Panther operating against them represented lost resources they desperately needed. German armored divisions in the final months were skeletal, short of tanks, fuel, ammunition, everything. Watching intact Panthers operated by Americans while German units went into battle with worn-out Mark IVs and improvised assault guns added bitter irony to military defeat. German prisoner interrogations conducted throughout the spring of 1945 revealed the profound psychological impact. Allied intelligence officers asked specific questions about morale, effectiveness, and attitudes toward American forces. The responses consistently mentioned captured equipment as a factor in declining German confidence. One prisoner from a Panzer division captured in April stated that his unit had received warnings about American forces operating German tanks but initially dismissed them as propaganda. Encountering an American crewed Panther in actual combat shattered that assumption, and with it his confidence in German military superiority. Another interrogation report from the 1st Army Intelligence Section documented a fascinating psychological dimension. A German tank commander captured near the Rhine described feeling betrayed by his own equipment. He had survived the Eastern Front, fought in France, believed in the technical superiority of German armor as an article of faith. Seeing Americans operate Panthers effectively undermined not just tactical assumptions but deeper beliefs about German excellence. If Americans could master German tanks within days, what did that say about inherent superiority? The question gnawed at prisoners, visible in interrogation transcripts that show men grappling with ideological collapse alongside military defeat. The numbers, when historians finally compiled them from SCAD, aired records, told an incomplete but suggestive story. First and Third Armies reported using captured German tanks in combat roles in at least 40 documented instances between December 1944 and May 1945. The actual number was certainly higher. Many instances went unreported, filed in unit records that were lost or destroyed or simply never documented in the chaos of mobile warfare. Some historians estimate the real total was over 100 separate incidents of American forces operating German armor in combat. Casualty comparisons provided harder data. American tank battalions operating captured Panthers alongside Shermans reported lower loss rates for the Panthers when facing German armor. The sample size was too small for statistical certainty, but the trend was clear. Panthers absorbed damage that would destroy Shermans, survived engagements that would have been fatal in American equipment. This validated what tankers had known intuitively from the beginning. German armor was better designed for tank versus tank combat. American armor was better designed for the broader range of tasks modern mechanized warfare demanded. Post-war analysis by United States Army historians examined the phenomenon as part of larger studies on combat effectiveness and adaptation. One study concluded that American willingness to use captured equipment reflected broader cultural and institutional flexibility that was itself a strategic advantage. The Wehrmacht, for all its tactical proficiency, operated within rigid doctrinal constraints that discouraged improvisation. American forces adapted constantly, incorporated lessons quickly, modified doctrine based on battlefield experience. Using captured tanks was just one example of this adaptability, but it symbolized a deeper difference in military culture. The practice did raise questions that troubled some post-war analysts. Had American forces become dependent on captured equipment to compensate for inadequate domestic designs? Should the industrial base have prioritized quality over quantity? Could American factories have produced a tank comparable to the Panther in time to matter? The debates continued for decades, influencing post-war armor development. The M26 Pershing heavy tank, which entered service in limited numbers in early 1945, represented American attempts to match German armor quality. Its late arrival meant most American tankers fought the entire war in Shermans, adapting and improvising rather than enjoying equipment parity. But adaptation had worked. American armored divisions rolled into Berlin and Prague, met Soviet forces at the Elbe, accepted German surrenders across a shattered Reich. They did it primarily in Shermans, backed by overwhelming numerical superiority, air support, artillery, and logistics that German forces couldn't match. The captured Panthers used along the way were tactical expedients, battlefield improvisations that provided local advantages in specific engagements. They weren't strategically decisive. American victory came from industrial might, strategic planning, and the aggregate advantages of a military system that could sustain global war across multiple theaters simultaneously. Yet those tankers who climbed into German armor and fought effectively did something that mattered beyond tactical metrics. They proved that American soldiers could master enemy equipment and use it better than the enemy. They demonstrated adaptability under pressure. They showed that equipment advantages could be overcome, turned around, exploited. They wrote a footnote to the broader story of American victory that spoke to resourcefulness, pragmatism, and the fierce determination of men who refused to be outfought regardless of what machines they drove. The captured Panthers became symbols of something essential about how America fought and won. The snow that fell on Belgian crossroads in December 1944 buried the burned-out hulls of tanks from both sides, American and German, covering the metal wreckage in white silence. The war moved on toward its inevitable conclusion. The captured Panthers that American crews operated eventually ran dry of ammunition, broke down beyond field repair, or were abandoned when better equipment became available. Most were scrapped after the war, melted down in the reconstruction of Europe, their brief service in American hands reduced to footnotes and after-action reports, and fading memories of men who operated them. But what those tankers did mattered beyond the immediate battles won or lost. They demonstrated that war is not finally decided by the quality of equipment, but by the quality of the people using it. German engineers designed magnificent tanks, but design alone doesn't win wars. Logistics wins wars. Adaptability wins wars. The ability to take whatever is at hand and make it work, to learn faster than the enemy, to turn disadvantages into advantages through sheer determination and ingenuity. The American tankers who climbed into Panthers and fought effectively weren't betraying their own equipment or admitting defeat. They were doing what soldiers have always done throughout history. They were surviving. They were adapting. They were using every available resource to accomplish their mission and bring themselves and their comrades home alive. The fact that some of those resources came from the enemy they were fighting was merely practical detail, not moral complication. The legacy lives in military doctrine that values flexibility over rigid adherence to procedure. It lives in training programs that emphasize adaptive thinking and problem-solving under pressure. It lives in the understanding that technological advantage is temporary, but the human capacity to learn and adapt is constant. Decades later, when American forces would again face enemies using equipment and tactics that seemed superior, they would fall back on the same fundamental approach. Adapt faster. Learn quicker. Use whatever works. Turn enemy advantages into enemy vulnerabilities through creativity and determination. The captured Panthers, driven by American crews across frozen European battlefields in that desperate winter, were more than machines. They were proof that wars are won not by steel and engineering, but by the courage and resourcefulness of the people doing the fighting. That truth, forged in the Ardennes and proven in the ruins of Germany, remains as relevant now as it was then, a lesson written in white stars painted over black crosses,